Imagine living in a world where there is unlimited wealth, but with danger lurking behind every yen. The Yakuza, the infamous crime syndicate from Japan, have managed to build themselves an empire worth billions. This video peels the veil of mystery on how they actually attained their wealth. We show how they spend billions building mansions, buying pricey cars, and living a life of opulence while conducting business in the dark underworld of crime. The origins of Yakuza wealth. The Yakuza did not become billionaires overnight. In fact, they have roots of poverty. Indeed, the Burakumina caste of outcasts in Japan was where the initial ranks of the Yakuza were attained. These were people who were relegated to jobs nobody else wanted, jobs that pertained to death and impurity. Because of their lowly ranking, they were shunted to the fringes of society. Yet, out of the harshest of conditions, there stood a way for the Yakuza to rise. First, they undertook jobs such as gambling, trading in stolen goods, and running underground markets. It was about survival, not just making money, in a society that didn't want them. These outcasts were gradually to become a force to be reckoned with. By the late 19th century, they had gained a foothold in Japan's criminal underworld. Academics such as Peter Hill have traced the early Yakuza's growth to their ability to adapt to a changing society. As modernization got underway, the Yakuza discovered new ways of raising money, including smuggling and protection rackets. Post-war growth and expansion, World War II had left Japan in ruins. The economy was in shreds, with people surviving from day to day after the war. It was at this time that the Yakuza made their move. While the government was still trying to get a grip on everything, the Yakuza seized black markets and sold protection to businesses that could no longer rely on the police. During this time, their wealth exploded. From small-time operations to large-scale extortion and real estate deals, the Yakuza operated everything from gambling to construction, as their dealings began to include politicians and businessmen. Scholars argue that expansion in the post-war period was facilitated by the fact that these people could work their way into society's gaps. Where government was often unable, the Yakuza stepped in, providing services where those services were needed but not available through legitimate channels. This left them with a wealth and power base that would grow very rapidly. By the 1960s, the Yakuza was a multi-billion-dollar empire. Lavish lives of Yakuza bosses. When billions were at their discretion, the bosses of the Yakuza did not sit on their money. This money was spent by the bosses on luxurious homes and cars, coupled with an excessively extravagant life. Some of the Yakuza bosses live in multi-million-dollar mansions with high walls and private security. These are not only homes, they were symbols of power and wealth. Yet not all Yakuza bosses wear their wealth loudly, with brazen bravado. Some, like Shinoda, have more minimalist sensibilities, preferring to project a humble public image. To wit, the Japanese media reports that Shinoda takes public transportation and eats at lowly restaurants. Such tactics are part of an apparent strategy to keep away the gaze of law enforcement, according to scholars. Even so, their wealth can't stay hidden. Off-stage, the vehicles that carry Yakuza bosses are of Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and customized Nissans. Of course, these are not the only status symbol. They are vehicles meant for the purpose of protection from other rival gangs and law enforcement. Works by David Kaplan refer to cases where such ostensible characteristics of affluence reinforce the power of a boss within his organization. Cars as symbols of power and protection. A glance at what the Yakuza drive will tell you all you need to know about where their priorities lie. For most people, a car is simply a means to get them from one point to another. But in the world of the Yakuza, it can be equated to a status symbol of power, wealth, and security. Driving a high-end, heavily customized vehicle is not only about flexing for the bosses, it's also partly about survival. But it's the Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and Nissan President models that are most well-liked by Yakuza bosses. In most instances, Such cars are equipped with bulletproof glass, reinforced doors, or even high-tech security. What looks to the ordinary citizen like success, a nice, fancy car is, in fact, a very practical tool in a very dangerous world. Other gangs, police, and even their own organization make personal safety number one. To scholar David E. Kaplan, who spent years studying the Yakuza, even the car a leader is driving can indicate status. The lower members will drive less conspicuous cars, while bosses will spend their money to show off luxury cars, costing more than most people make in a year. These are rolling symbols of the Yakuza's control and influence within their own internal hierarchy and in greater society. But it's not just security and status. Cars also are mobile offices for Yakuza chiefs. When you run various businesses, property, and extracurricular activities in crime, you really need to be mobile and connected at the same time. Fancy cars with lots of gadgets inside turn Yakuza bosses into mobile businessmen with at least the appearance of power and sophistication. From gambling dens to skyscrapers, the real estate empire, the Yakuza involvement in real estate goes back to the time of their early days in illegal gambling dens. These gambling dens were sometimes right out in the open, located in buildings they either owned or had influence over. As their power grew, they expanded their operations away from those small, dingy dens to much larger-scale real estate ventures. By the beginning of the 20th century, they were buying up whole neighborhoods. Scholar Peter Hill in his writing presents the transformations of Yakuza from street-level criminal activities to more financial, high-level ones. According to Hill, the Yakuza soon realized that owning property was perhaps one of the safest and most profitable ways to expand their wealth. Property provided a steady stream of income and gave them power over the local communities. It means that having the high-rise buildings where people either live or work places one in a position of controlling the purse strings or influence in an area. Various businesses and properties in big cities like Tokyo and Osaka are owned by the Yakuza. Businesses include restaurants and hotels to high-class apartments. One of the main advantages derived from owning such businesses by the Yakuza is hiding illegal earnings through investment in real estate. As the scholar-journalist Jake Adelstein, who for many years has reported on Japan's organized crime, has documented, the Yakuza obscure their real estate with shell companies and family members. That way, they can retain valuable assets without calling much official attention to it. The Yakuza involvement in real estate is not only reflected in property ownership, but also extends into being very instrumental in Japan's construction industry. In fact, some of the biggest construction projects in the country, ranging from skyscrapers to highways, have links with the Yakuza. This organized crime link to construction dates back to the post-war era, when Japan was reconstructing its cities. Immediately after World War II, Japan was plagued by severe home and structural shortages. Government officials nationwide desperately needed to construct new buildings as quickly as possible, and the Yakuza took full advantage of it. They acquired building contracts through much bribery and strong-arming. Academic researcher Yuka Kobayashi discussed how the Yakuza managed to permeate Japan's construction market and leveraged their power to corner lucrative contracts and control labor. The Yakuza sometimes offered protection services for construction firms, ensuring that projects were not interfered with by rival firms or labor unions. This protection had a price tag on it, naturally enough, but for many firms, the price was worth paying as part of doing business. Before long, the Yakuza were thoroughly enmeshed in the construction business, from the laborers to the materials used in the building process. The art of money laundering, Yakuza and fine art. Art and organized crime, of course, may not be the most obvious of bedfellows, but for the Yakuza, art serves more purposes than decoration. It is a financial asset and another means through which money is laundered. In recent years, the members of the Yakuza have grown into keen collectors of both traditional Japanese art and modern works by international artists. Owning art is one of the methods by which the Yakuza would not be questioned. as they moved huge amounts of money. Most of the high-value commodities are often subjected to wild fluctuations in prices, therefore making this particular method perfect for money laundering. The usual practice in which the Yakuza buy art is through middlemen, according to scholar Michiko Suzuki, who studied the association between art and organized crime. The Yakuza can then sell the art at a later time with a higher value and will have thereby laundered their illegal gains into legal income. In other cases, Yakuza members have even taken it as far as to pawn the art for loans. This adds even greater complexity to tracking these financial dealings of theirs. Many examples have been documented by scholar Peter Hill, in which Yakuza-affiliated businesses were able to use art in order to obtain bank financing, though these businesses had ties to criminal activity. But it is not only about money. For some members of the Yakuza, collecting art is also a way of displaying wealth and status. Among members of the Yakuza, the collection of fine arts denotes sophistication and power. It surely ascertains to others within the organization that one has reached the top and one is someone whom respect must be accorded. Scholar Michiko Suzuki has pointed out that, for some Yakuza members, collecting traditional art reinforces their self-identity as the protector of Japanese culture. Whatever their activities might be, the Yakuza often see themselves as part of Japan's historical fabric, much like the samurai of feudal times. In collecting traditional art, they are not only preserving these cultural artifacts, but also using them to legitimize their place in society. However, the interest of Yakuza in art is not restricted to their national borders. In the recent years, they have emerged as active players in the international art market by buying works of famous artists from all over the world. Thus, they have succeeded in diversifying their assets and getting a hold on the international economy. This is documented by scholar David E. Kaplan, who shows that members of the Yakuza use offshore accounts to buy art from European and American galleries, further complicating attempts to track their financial activities. Yakuza gambling empires, billions from bets. Gambling has always been at the heart of the Yakuza's operations. Since the early days of their being, the Yakuza have had illegal gambling dens, which have finally turned into major sources of income. Often hidden in plain sight, these dens continue to rake in millions of yen each year. The reason is not strictly monetary, it is also about power and control. For the Yakuza, gambling is a way to keep up with the disciplinary actions of their organization. As one scholar, Peter Hill, argues, gambling in Yakuza culture is not about one of their money-making activities, but rather one sure way to command loyalty and obedience. Cheating or disrespecting the rules in Yakuza-controlled gambling dens may get one severe punishment. It may even be as bad as death. That would mean the stake of losing financially and physically is always clear. But the Yakuza's gamble goes far more than just small, obscure dens. In recent decades, expansion into more sophisticated gambling operations involved underground casinos and illegal online gambling platforms. According to scholar David E. Kaplan, those modern operations pull in billions of yen each year, one of the top pulls for the Yakuza. Of all the various forms of gambling in Japan, one of the most lucrative is a game called pachinko, which really resembles a form of pinball. Although pachinko falls into a gray area in terms of legality, being treated more as a form of entertainment than gambling, the Yakuza have taken advantage of this fact for many years. Pachinko parlors dot the Japanese landscape, with many either directly controlled by the Yakuza or paying them off for protection. Scholar Yuka Kobayashi has written about Yakuza involvement in the pachinko business. Indeed, the parlors yield billions of yen in revenue yearly. Of this money, the Yakuza take a cut by either owning the parlors or offering protection to them. In return, the parlors are left to conduct their businesses without any interference from other gangs or law enforcement. One of the great examples of how this group adapted to the changes in laws and regulations is the Yakuza's control over the pachinko industry. Pachinko gamifies in such a way that Japanese law cannot consider it gambling, while indeed leading to potential gambling gains. That made it possible for the Yakuza to profit directly without actually breaking the law, keeping their gambling empire working in a safer way. Drugs, prostitution, and human trafficking. The wealth of the Yakuza is not only based on gambling and real estate. In fact, a great amount of their wealth is from illegal and morally depraved activities, such as drug trafficking, prostitution, and human trafficking. These have formed the backbone of operations undertaken by the Yakuza for many decades, thereby generating billions of yen for their organizations. The most lucrative and dark businesses of the Yakuza involve them in the leading of the narcotics trade in much illegal drugs, including methamphetamines, marijuana, and synthetic drugs such as MDMA. This prevalence of the Yakuza in Japan's narcotics market has also been well chronicled through a number of scholarly analyses from multiple authors, one of whom is Peter Hill, citing them as in control of the majority of the flow of drugs into the country. While highly regulated, drugs are obtainable in Japan via sophisticated networks created by the Yakuza to evade these laws by importing drugs from such places as China, Southeast Asia, and South America. Human trafficking is another nook in the empire of Yakuza. They have long been involved in trafficking women from countries such as Thailand, the Philippines, and Eastern Europe under false pretenses of giving them jobs or other opportunities. These women, when they arrive in Japan, are subsequently put into prostitution. The Yakuza operates brothels disguised as massage parlors, karaoke bars, and hostess clubs, where these women are compelled to engage in sex work. Scholar Jake Adelstein, who researched much about the Yakuza, claimed that many of these women are bound by debt and fear, thus remain unable to get out from the clutches of the Yakuza once they are trafficked. This is just one example of how several powerful organizations control massive amounts of money. To further discuss this, we invite you to watch our next video titled "The Families That Own America," wherein an in-depth exploration into the wealth and power in the United States will give great insight into how money shapes our world. If this video has given you valuable information, then take a minute to like and subscribe. Share it with your friends and family. That is the only way we can continue bringing these stories to the fore. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.